back to the Mindful of You podcast. This is episode 67, My Advice for Claire Dunphy. It's been a while since advice segment. I decided to do this because I've been watching Modern Family and I love it. It's my first time watching it. I'm slowing down a little bit. I still really like it, but seasons 1 through 5 were 10 out of 10. I'm in season 7 right now and I'm kind of just losing steam, but there's a lot of episodes. It's a long show, but it's really good. So if you haven't seen Modern Family, I watch it on HBO Max. I think it's fairly appropriate for the most part, for my standards, I guess. I would say it's as appropriate, if not more appropriate, than The Office and Parks and Rec. If people disagree with that, that's okay, but that's my thoughts. So really good show, and one character in there popped out to me right from the start, not necessarily for the best reasons. But something really fun about Modern Family is they are all very, very flawed, and they don't try and pretend people are perfect or good people necessarily by any means, which I think is really fun for art because we are inherently flawed and it can create natural drama. We don't have to contrive things, but just our natural flaws and things we stress about, things we're anxious about can create really beautiful storytelling. So the storytelling theater nerd in me loves that about Modern Family. The reason Claire Dunphy popped out to me and what I told my husband when we first started watching the show was, I'm afraid that's who I'd be without therapy. And the character has really grown on me a lot, I should be honest, and she's actually kind of mellowed out in some ways too, but especially in those first few seasons, I was like, this is me. If I was letting my brain run amok, I'd be controlling everybody, controlling everything. I was faced with my worst nightmare for 15, 20 years from now, and I was like, no. I don't want to be her. And so she's actually a very popular character now. I know she's very beloved by many people, so I want to make it clear that I actually do really like her and I understand why she's the way that she is, but is kind of looking in a future mirror sometimes, and it can be a little freaky. So I wanted to do my advice for segment for her. I speak to a lot of generalizations of these characters. There's obviously episodes where they go against what I'm going to try and say or where they do what I'm going to say, but more just how they are generally speaking. Claire, how she is generally speaking, and who she is a mom and a wife. So her and her husband Phil have 3 kids. Luke, Alex, and Haley. She started having kids really young. I think she got pregnant when she was 20 or 21. She is a stay-at-home mom at least for the first few seasons. So that's the version of her I'm talking about. She's really keen on organization. She has a way of doing things. She tends to think that she's right. So she can come off as pretty controlling, as what some people would refer to stereotypically as a little OCD, although I don't really use that term unless somebody's been diagnosed with OCD, but it helps you kind of know what I'm talking about. So that's a little bit about who Claire is, even though she's so much more than that. So I have 5 pieces of advice I want to give to her, and to my future self if I am reverting to some bad habits. So my first piece of advice is just, you're doing a good job, and remember to tell yourself you're doing a good job. So I think a lot of the reason that Claire is the way she is because she wants to do well by her children, by her family. She wants to be a good mother. She wants everybody around her to be happy, to a fault. I don't think she realizes that she can't always control other people's happiness or what happens for other people. And so in that way it can be to a fault. And so I think it would do her well to remind herself that she is doing a good job. She's a good mom. She's a good wife. She's a good person, in that she doesn't need to control everything or make sure everybody's lives are in order to know that and to believe that. My second piece of advice is learn to allow other people to make mistakes. then I have a parenthetical here that says even the same ones you made. So I don't know if you guys have ever been in the situation where you can see that somebody's doing something they shouldn't be doing, and it's not usually even anything moral. I'm more thinking of the example like if you have someone who should be doing homework and they're not doing their homework, and it's like, that's going to come back to bite them. And so you're like, do your homework, you know? It can be really hard to watch children or spouses or really close friends or loved ones do things that you know aren't good for them, or you're pretty sure aren't good for them, because really you can't know for sure. No matter how right you think you are, you can't know. I'm saying that to myself. But if she would learn to allow other people to make mistakes, they could face natural consequences, or they could learn on their own how things should be or what they should be doing. It's really hard to do that because you want people to feel good. And especially this parenthetical, I think she sees a lot of herself in her oldest daughter, Haley, and how she was as a kid. So she tries really hard to get in there and control her, help her not make the same mistakes that she did. But you turned out okay for the most part, and your kid will be okay too, even if they make some of those mistakes. I know this can be a hard line to walk, especially as a parent, because it's like, okay, well, some rules are in place for their safety. I don't want their natural consequence to be really detrimental. But where possible, try and let them make their own mistakes. And even if you think it's going to be like harmful for them, as long as it's not, life or death situation, sometimes those natural consequences can be really good. So take care of your children. It's not what I'm saying by any means to not take care of them. But take care of them, love them, but recognize that bad things will happen to them because that's life and it's really hard to watch. But I think we can all be more at peace when we accept those kinds of things. Okay. My third piece of advice, appreciate the good in those you love whenever you can. She does a good job of this sometimes. Just like every person, she's nuanced, and so sometimes she's really doting and loving on her husband and her kids, and sometimes she's not, just like all of us. But she, I think especially with her husband, has a tendency to nitpick his flaws and things that she wishes were different about him. And if she could appreciate the good in him and in her children more often, I think she would be a lot happier. This is something I've experienced firsthand. I learned a technique in my OCD treatment program called savoring. And so basically, this is where you have a good moment happening, or you just kind of notice like, that's pretty cool, like things are pretty good right now, and you savor it. So you intentionally look at the moment and express gratitude for it just in your mind, and just kind of be there and be grateful. So I've had moments like this when like my husband's laying on my lap or I'm laying on his shoulder and we're watching a show, and I just go, like, life is good. This is good. And like moments like that allow you to appreciate the good in other people and to see it more readily and go, that's pretty cute, or that's pretty cool. I like that about them. So I would tell Claire, the more she can do that, the better she's gonna feel. My number 4 piece of advice for her is learn to sacrifice being right for peace. I know this is a little controversial, but being right is not always helpful. Sometimes we have this drive to be right more than to be happy. And there are certain times where maybe that's a good thing and you need that drive and you need that fire to fight for something that's important to you. But oftentimes it's not one of your values. It's not something that's actually important to you. And so don't let yourself get caught up in that and go, oh, I'm standing up for my values, like I am right. If it's not actually one of your values and it's not a big deal, you can let it go, and you don't have to be right, or you don't have to prove to anybody else that you're right. And you can just let it be what it is. I think that the world would be a better place if we all didn't care so much about being right. Okay, my last piece of advice for Claire, I touched on this a little bit in my second one, but how your kids turn out or their decisions are not always a direct reflection of how you parent them. So I think that like the whole nature versus nurture argument is a little bit, it's not pointless, but we're never going to know how much of who we are is because of how we were raised or because of how we were born, what was given to us from God, what was because our parents were this way. It's really impossible to know unless somebody studied each one of us for a very long time across generations. That would be really hard to figure out. So with that, I will say, yeah, probably a good portion of how your kids turn out could have something to do with how you raise them, but it's probably not a direct correlation, or it's definitely not a direct cause. And so I think that Claire oftentimes gets caught up in, I have to make sure I'm doing things right, or I have to make sure my kids are right and okay because I need to be a good mom. And I think all we can do is our best, and then whatever our kids choose to do is ultimately gonna be up to them and their life experience. And so just remember that you, yes, can be an influence. I'm not going to deny that, but you are not the end all be all of that influence. You do not cause your children and who they are and how they are. There's so many factors that go into it. And so if you're not thrilled with where your kids are right now, one, I would invite you to try and see the good in them and try and see the good of where they are. And two, take out any blame or shame that's on yourself and don't put it on them. That's not necessary. But remember that it's not a direct reflection of the kind of parent you were or are. I say all of this knowing full well I'm not a parent, but I'm a kid. And I know as a kid, I have amazing parents, wonderful parents, and I can see their influence on me in some ways, maybe even many ways, but there are other things where I'm like, no idea where that came from, no idea where that personality trait came from, no idea where that thought pattern came from, and I don't think it's related to my parents. It could be related to something else entirely, and so I would imagine the same is true for you and for your children. So that is my advice for Claire Dunphy from Modern Family. Let me know what you think. If you like Claire, if she drives you crazy, who your favorite Modern Family characters are, love to hear it. Thank you guys so much for listening, and I can't wait to talk to you next week.